Good morning. I convene this hearing of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigation. Well, in less than 2 weeks, enrollment in qualified health plans under the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act will begin. It's the law of the land. Today we hope to discuss the many challenges and issues that may arise over the coming weeks. Most of the concerns about the law currently can be reduced to one question: is the administration ready? Since passage of the President's health care law, the administration has consistently told us that the government will be ready when open enrollment begins on October 1st and the exchanges start on January 1st. Yet our experience has shown that rosy predictions about the future of the health care law often give way to results of this rushed and rocky implementation. The law has many problems, and so much so that half of it was simply done away with for a year. While individuals must comply with the law's requirements starting on January 1 or pay a penalty, this is not so for businesses and companies who are able to delay the employer mandate for a year. Despite the administration's promises about lower premiums, evidence continues to mount that some individuals will face extreme rate hikes when the exchange is open, as much as double the price they are currently paying. And the administration's promise that if you like your coverage, you can keep it rings especially hollow now, with news reports almost every day about businesses moving the spouses and families of their employers or their retirees into the exchanges. If the President's promises were true, we wouldn't hear stories about major airlines losing millions of dollars to the health care law, and we wouldn't hear about the spouses of thousands of employees losing their coverages. Meanwhile, any sort of oversight over the health care law remains taboo for the law's defenders. Last month, this committee sent letters to many of the recipients of federal funding to participate in the Navigator program under the law. We asked some fairly basic questions. How many people are you hiring? What are you paying them? Are you performing background checks? We should expect that groups receiving federal dollars to enroll people in exchanges should have answers to these questions as enrollment begins in less than 2 weeks. In the course of this investigation, the committee has had many productive calls with recipients of Navigator funding. I've had some personal meetings myself, which have been very fruitful. In fact, many of the organizations were prepared to answer our questions who we believe will be ready to properly perform their Navigator duties. Yet we've also seen that the Navigator program, like many of the programs created under the health care law, has been impacted by the administration's delay in implementing the law. According to a GAO report issued in June, the administration issued the Navigator grants 2 months behind schedule. The administration had planned to issue the first round of awards in June. They did not end up issuing them until August. The administration had originally planned to begin Navigator training in July, but HHS did not finalize the training programs until August 29. This delay naturally reduced by almost half the time available to navigators to begin training and preparing for enrollment. So today we will ask Mr. Gary Cohen, the Director of the Center for Consumer Information and Insurance Oversight, to explain how the abbreviated training schedule for navigators will affect the program. We'll also ask Mr. Cohen to address some of the concerns we've identified in our review of the grant applications. We learned that some navigators are planning on going door-to-door to conduct enrollment activities. A report issued yesterday by the Oversight and Government Reform Committee indicates that CCIIO representatives are aware of problems linked to door-to-door outreach activities, such as scammers knocking on doors and falsely representing them they are navigators. And yet, this activity is still permitted under the Navigator program. We've also learned that the return on taxpayer dollars varies wildly among Navigator grant recipients. The administration is paying one navigator $80,000 to enroll 312 people. That's $80,000 of taxpayer funding to enroll not even a person a day. On the other hand, other groups clearly have incredibly high expectations. Another applicant estimated that they would enroll approximately 75% of the individuals directly contacted, resulting in hundreds of thousands of enrollee individuals. There's a wide difference in expectations and workload. Our concerns over the safety of consumer data and health information remain as well. One navigator plans to survey and track those who attend community meetings under the promises additional pay if a navigator enrolls a certain amount of individuals. I have concerns about paying for that. Meanwhile, one navigator told committee staff that they believe background checks are important, yet these are not a required action. Our responsibility in conducting oversight of federal programs is to identify waste, fraud, and abuse. In the best case, asking questions about federal spending and shining a light on programs can identify problems before taxpayer dollars are wasted and allow those problems to be corrected. A wait-and-see approach to oversight of the health care reform law does not seem appropriate when its implementation has been regularly botched by delays and uncertainty. Let me add to this. As a clinician and psychologist myself, it was hardly ever appropriate for me or other of my colleagues in the medical field to wait until problems were at a severe or critical level. We'd like to know problems early and take action. That is the appropriate thing to do. And any claims that we are doing otherwise are inappropriate and spurious at best. So I welcome Mr. Cohen, and I look forward to asking him questions about what we can expect in the coming weeks. I now recognize Ranking Member DeGette for her opening statement.
We're going to have Mr. Waxman because he has to go to the other.
But she's going to yield to Mr. Waxman because he has another commitment this
Thank
morning.
you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative DeGette, for yielding to me this time to make an opening statement. Oversight is important and valuable, but the Affordable Care Act oversight of the last 3 years has not been to enlighten the committee or improve the law. It appears to be part of the efforts by the Republican Party to engage in partisan attacks on this law, and if they can do it, to even sabotage the Affordable Care Act. I released a report last month highlighting the unprecedented Republican campaign to undermine the law. 41 repeal votes, refusals to expand Medicaid to cover millions of low-income Americans, and the imminent threat to shut down the entire federal government or force a catastrophic government default if the law is not repealed. There is no legitimate purpose served by the letters to 51 navigators who are community groups, food banks, community health providers, and many similar non-political organizations tasked with trying to help inform the public about the Affordable Care Act benefits. This request was ill-timed and a serious mistake. And I find it amazing to hear the chairman talk about how they haven't had enough time to do their job, but now we're trying to, by the committee, divert them from doing their job by answering all sorts of questions. The letters sent to them were without a predicate or evidence of wrongdoing. They serve only to burden and intimidate these organizations just as they are beginning their critical work. My staff yesterday released an analysis of the Navigator program. Our investigation found that Navigators will help millions obtain health insurance coverage, that they have extensive experience assisting individuals with federal and state benefit programs, and they have effective privacy protections in place. In short, the Republican rhetorical attacks on the Navigator program, I believe, are unjustified and inconsistent with the facts. It is hard to escape the conclusion that it was designed to intimidate these groups and discourage participation in the program. Thanks to the Affordable Care Act, millions of Americans will be able to get high-quality, affordable insurance. The worst abuses of the insurance companies have been ended. This Republican approach, I believe, is bad for the country. I want to now yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Butterfield.
Thank you, Mr. Waxman, for yielding time, and thank you for your extraordinary leadership. You not only wrote the Affordable Care Act, but you got it through this committee. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I am pleased to announce that tens of thousands of my constituents in North Carolina have already benefited from the Affordable Care Act. 130,000 seniors are now eligible for Medicare preventative services. 41,000 children can no longer be denied coverage based on pre-existing conditions. 8,200 young adults now have coverage on their parents' plans. It has been a long path, and we are almost there. With the beginning of open season on October 1st, less than 2 weeks away, we will be one step closer to helping many Americans receive affordable and quality health care. The opening of the marketplace, the education and support provided by, yes, the Navigators, and the outreach by HHS will help directly enroll 1.1 million uninsured people and assist an additional 7.3 million uninsured people to receive health insurance. But instead of touting the success of soon having nearly every American insured, my Republican friends have forced more than 40 votes to dismantle and defund the act. The chairman of this committee, in my opinion, abused his investigatory authority by launching a fishing expedition of navigators who receive funding solely for the purpose of discrediting the program. This, Mr. Chairman, distracts the navigators' attention, you know it and I know it, from their mission of helping families to access health insurance. Someone said that many of these navigators will be going door to door. I hope they will be going door to door to enroll every uninsured American. A North Carolina newspaper recently reported that one of my North Carolina Republican colleagues who serves on this committee said that she would be pleased if the Congressional Navigator inquiry stymies the nonprofit's Navigator work. And she is quoted in that article as saying, if this ended up resulting in a delay, I wouldn't be unhappy about it. This is an outrage, Mr. Chairman. I would hope that when October 1st that we would unite and make sure that every American gets access to affordable health care. The American people deserve it, and we need to bring this debate to a close. Thank you, Mr. Waxman. I'll yield back to you, sir.
Gentleman yields back and now recognized for 5 minutes. The gentleman from Texas, Dr. Burgess.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the recognition, and here we are a dozen days from the start date of October 1st, where the open enrollment is going to occur. Don't know a whole lot more than I did the last time Mr. Cohen was here at the end of April of this year. Since that time, I've been told time and time again by officials from Health and Human Services, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Treasury, the White House, and of course even you when you were here, Mr. Cohen, that the exchanges would definitely be ready to go live on October 1, 2013. In addition, the federal hub that is supposedly going to be operational in 12 days, we have not had made available to us any of the testing data that reportedly has been done, and that obviously is an important aspect that many of us continue to have a great deal of interest. Even more concerning is the fact that federal officials have assigned much of their responsibility for the education and outreach to federally funded navigators. Now, similar to the administration's other delays, while Health and Human Services had initially planned to issue the first round of Navigator grants in June and begin training in July, the grants were issued on August 15, and the training program was not available to the navigators until the end of that month. Yet $67 million, $13 million more than originally budgeted, $67 million of taxpayer money taken by threat by the IRS from taxpayers across this country. $67 million has been given out to navigators across the nation, and we don't know the purpose of that money. Now, I want to reference an article from August 4th of 2012. So this is over a year ago. It appeared in the New York Times. The article says federal officials are looking for private contractors to provide in-person assistance to consumers and to operate call centers. A contractor will also help the government decide who gets federal subsidies, expected to average $6,000 a person, and who is exempt from the tax penalties that will be imposed on people who go without insurance. Again, this is August 4th of 2012, so it's not like the agency didn't know this was coming. The article goes on to say Mr. Hash, the director of the Federal Office of Health Reform, said that federal exchanges will operate essentially in the same manner as the state-based exchanges. However, they differ in a significant way. States have done their work in public, but planning for the federal exchanges has been done almost entirely behind closed doors. I think that is one of the problems that many of us on this committee have with that. Sabrina Corlett, continuing in the article, Sabrina Corlett, a research professor at Health Policy Institute at Georgetown University, said the federal exchanges were much more opaque than the state exchanges. You have to wonder what value is there in opacity in that situation from an administration who said it valued transparency. Yesterday morning, people who received their copy of the Wall Street Journal were greeted with the headline, "Burden Shifts on Insurance. Firms change health coverage. Walgreens to give workers payments to buy plans." You know, when the health care law was sold by the president across this country, it was sold with the admonition, if you like what you have, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your health plan, you can keep your health plan, but apparently not if you work for Walgreens. You know, we get criticized on this side of the dais because of attempts to rein in the Affordable Care Act. No apology for the number of times that legislation has come to the floor of the House to try to pull this thing back. It's never been popular. It's never enjoyed popular support. It is becoming increasingly clear how dangerous this law is to people's health and health care, how dangerous it is to our economy. But 7 times the president has signed one of those bills into law. So gone are the 1099 provisions, gone are the Class Act, gone are several other things. But here's a point that people miss. 7 other times, the president has decided himself that parts of the law were unimportant and the law that he signed was not, in fact, going to endure. What about the pre-existing condition program? This law was sold on the backs of people with pre-existing conditions across this country, and yet when someone showed up on February 1st of this year to enroll in the PSIP program, they were told, sorry, sister, the program is closed. So for 11 months, people with pre-existing conditions who had been promised relief are just simply wandering the country, wondering what they are supposed to do. The shop exchanges were supposed to open January 1st, 2014. You put it off to 2015. Removing the reporting requirements and relying on self-attestation, delaying final contracts with contractors, delaying the employer mandate, removing out-of-pocket caps. No premium information. This was promised to me by the administrator of CMS in July in this committee, that I would have this information by September 15th. Mr. Cohen, we are going the long way now to September 15th. And if you go to the website today on healthcare.gov, it says come back and see us in a few weeks. We're busy trying to get it ready. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence. I'll yield back my time.
Thank you. Now go to Ms. DeGette for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Before I make my opening statement, I'd like to recognize the newest member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Congressman John Yarmouth from Kentucky. We're very glad to have him. And I would ask unanimous consent to allow him to participate in the hearing today. He doesn't have subcommittee assignments yet, but we know he's going to be on this fabulous subcommittee very soon.
Without objection.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, we've spent more than our share of time in this subcommittee on the Affordable Care Act talking about implementation. It's our 7th hearing this year, and we really haven't seen any problems come up in all the hearings. So I want to thank Mr. Cohen for coming back again during a very busy time in his schedule as the exchanges open on October 1st. On this subcommittee, it's our job to unearth the facts in an objective and nonpartisan manner. So with 2 weeks to go before the marketplaces go live, I want to talk for a moment about what we've seen this year. We've obtained documents and conducted extensive investigation of health insurance premiums under the ACA. And what did we find out? The ACA is going to allow millions of Americans to obtain affordable insurance for the first time ever. HHS this week released a new report showing that nearly 6 in 10 currently uninsured Americans, 23.2 million people, would be eligible to get insurance coverage for under $100 a month. A Kaiser Family Foundation study released earlier this month concluded that premiums are generally lower than expected. A new RAND study reached similar conclusions. The facts also show that individuals with health insurance coverage are already benefiting from the Act. The HHS revealed that 6.8 million customers saved an estimated $1.2 billion on their premiums in 2012 due to the rate review provisions in the ACA. This committee also conducted an investigation into the contractors responsible for implementing the ACA's marketplaces. This is one of my favorite hearings because what did the facts show? They showed that the contractors will be ready on October 1st, that they are taking appropriate steps to protect consumer privacy, and as an added benefit, they're creating thousands of jobs. Last month, Mr. Chairman, you opened an investigation into the ACA Navigator program. That's what we're here today for. You sent dozens of letters to dozens of civic and community groups that received grants to help their neighbors sign up for ACA benefits. In a letter to Chairman Upton, Ranking Member Waxman expressed his concern that this investigation was designed not to enlighten the committee, but to intimidate the navigators. And I'm sorry to say, I kind of agree with those criticisms. There seems to be little reason to put these burdens on the navigators just as they were starting to get their work going with the public. And the committee's investigation shows there's no basis for the allegations about the navigators. Yesterday, the minority staff released a supplemental memo summarizing its review of the navigator documents. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask that that be made part of the record.
Without objection.
The investigation found that navigators will help millions of people obtain health insurance coverage. They have extensive experience assisting individuals with federal and state benefit programs. Most navigators are nonprofit, nonpartisan community service providers, and they have effective privacy provisions in place. Those are the facts, and they show good news. Mr. Chairman, you talked in your opening statement about these false navigators that are going door to door, and that is a concern. That's why we have to have the real navigators in place so they can sign people up. And just yesterday, HHS, DOJ, and the FTC announced a massive anti-fraud effort. I would suggest we all work together to stop any kind of fraud in the system. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I want to yield the balance of my time to Representative Castor.
Well, I thank the ranking member for yielding time. I wanted to relay today the enthusiasm I'm hearing back home from so many of my neighbors, particularly when it comes to now the bar against discrimination for our neighbors who have pre-existing conditions. Just over the past few weeks, I've met with leaders in communities with multiple sclerosis, diabetes, HIV/AIDS, cancer, that now see hope. They have hope because they will be able to get insurance for a change and not be discriminated against. Now, since September of 2010, children with these chronic diseases and chronic conditions have been able to get insurance. In the greater Tampa Bay area, that has meant 237,000 children have been able to get insurance where before they couldn't. Now, beginning January 1st, this will apply to adults. So they are particularly enthused, but at the same time, they are very troubled by the Republican obstruction and sabotage. They don't understand why now people are going to block access to the doctor's office and affordable care. So I look forward to discussing that today.
Thank you. Gentlelady's time has expired. By the way, I also want to recommend the Chairman of Environment and the Economy here, Mr. Shimkus, is going to sit on this hearing. Thank you for being here. I will now swear in the witness. And so introducing Mr. Cohen is the Deputy Administrator and Director of the Center for Consumer Information and Insurance Oversight. Recently served as General Counsel for California Health Benefits Exchange, and we will swear in the witness. You're aware the committee is holding an investigative hearing, and when doing so is a practice of taking testimony under oath. Do you have any objections to testify under oath, Mr. Cohen? Then it advises you that under the rules of the House and rules of the committee, you are entitled to be advised by counsel. Do you desire to be advised by counsel during a testimony today? Thank you. In that case, Sorry, Wynn, if you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. You're now under oath and subject to the penalties set forth in Title 18, Section 1001 of the United States Code. You may now please give a 5-minute summary of your written testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Murphy, Ranking Member DeGette, members of the subcommittee. I look forward to answering your questions regarding CMS's ongoing work to implement the Affordable Care Act, including the Navigator program. As we approach the beginning of open enrollment, CMS and all of our partners across the country are focused on helping people sign up for affordable health care coverage that begins on January 1st. We are already seeing that competition works. The creation of new marketplaces is encouraging insurers to offer plans at competitive rates. As a result, in 16 states, preliminary rates are 19% less expensive than the CBO projected. States are using their improved rate review powers to help keep rates affordable. And according to recent estimates, as Congresswoman DeGette mentioned, many consumers may be able to pay $100 or less per person per month for coverage in 2014. When open enrollment begins on October 1st, it is one more step towards putting in place one of the core promises of the Affordable Care Act, affordable, accessible health coverage that begins next year. We're working hard to ensure that consumers have the information they need about their coverage options. Healthcare.gov has received more than 3 million unique visits since its relaunch this summer. And as required by the law, CMS has awarded grants to over 100 organizations to serve as navigators. These grantees are groups and organizations with a proven ability to reach out to likely marketplace consumers in their local communities. Navigators include the Pennsylvania Association of Community Health Centers, which since 1981 has been supporting community health centers across the state in their mission of providing access to quality primary health care. They are organizations like Ascension Healthcare, which is the nation's largest Catholic and nonprofit health system. The Martin Luther King Health Center, which has been serving the people in Shreveport, Louisiana since 1986. The University of Mississippi Medical Center. The United Way of Metropolitan Tarrant County, which will be collaborating with 17 other organizations and assisting Texas residents, and which has been helping people in the Fort Worth and Arlington areas for 90 years. And the University of Georgia, which was founded in 1785 as the nation's first state-chartered university. I find the suggestion that these organizations, that the United Way or the University of Georgia or any of the rest, are going to prey on people by stealing their identities to be utterly without foundation. Helping people is the reason that these organizations exist. Navigators are prepared to provide accurate and impartial assistance to consumers shopping for health insurance coverage. They'll be required to adhere to strict privacy and security standards, including how to safeguard a consumer's personal information. Navigators will be required, the individuals will be required to complete approximately 20 hours of initial training to be certified, will take additional training throughout the year, and will renew their certification yearly. The work they will be doing is similar to work that has been done for years by SHIPs to help Medicare beneficiaries understand their options. I find it really unfortunate that many of these organizations are facing distracting scrutiny while they prepare to begin this important work. One organization, a group prepared to serve individuals in 4 states, withdrew from the program as a result of this scrutiny. This type of scrutiny risks creating an insinuation that these well-respected organizations and institutions like food banks, large state universities, and United Way chapters have somehow done something inappropriate before they've spoken to a single consumer. These groups are trying to do the same type of work they have done in their communities for years and in some cases decades. And it's unfortunate that they are the subject of inquiries that suggest they are doing something wrong by helping people in their communities enroll in health care coverage. They are feeling obligated to spend time responding to inquiries and insinuations that they are hiring unqualified staff or won't follow federal grant regulations, instead of beginning the task of helping people in their communities. It is disappointing that their resources and attention have been diverted at this critical time. I've been asked countless times over the last year whether we'll be ready for day one, and it often brings to my mind the implementation of Medicare Part D. Now, I wasn't at CMS during Medicare Part D implementation, but I read the news stories like everyone else, and I understand that there were some serious challenges. Seniors not enrolled correctly in plans, beneficiaries turned away from pharmacies without their medications. But CMS solved these problems, and the Part D program is now strong and successful. And if you ask beneficiaries about Part D today, you won't hear, oh, that's the program that had so many problems when it launched. Instead, you'll hear, that's the program that helps me afford my medication. And I believe that will be the story of the Affordable Care Act. The people actually benefiting from the law won't be talking about what happened on October 1st or on January 1st. They'll talk about how their child can get health coverage, even though he has a pre-existing condition. They'll talk about how they no longer have to pay more for premiums just because they're women. They'll talk about how they finally decided they could retire because they can now afford coverage they buy on their own. They'll talk about the security of not having to face bankruptcy due to a diagnosis. We may encounter some bumps when open enrollment begins, but we'll solve them because it's what we do. We're here to help people get health insurance, and we at CMS take this responsibility very seriously. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. And I recognize myself for 5 minutes and start off by saying, Mr. Cohen, I want you to understand the function of this committee. Lack of readiness or preparation on your part does not constitute a reason that Congress gives up its responsibilities to have oversight. So I hope you have an open mind as we go through this. You've previously been here at a hearing before. You told us everything was fine. It was like the scene in Animal House where the person's saying, remain calm, all is well, while chaos reigns. So let me ask you a few things here. On July 22nd, members of this committee wrote to Secretary Sebelius requesting information on the price of health insurance to be offered in the federal and federal-state partnership exchanges. HHS still hasn't announced the approved plans and premium prices. Am I correct?
That's true.
Okay. Now, that letter essentially was requesting what plans and prices would be available to consumers in the federal exchanges. When will this information be made public?
Consumers will be able to go online and see what plans are available to them on October 1st.
So are you able today, with less than 2 weeks before enrollment begins, to provide any information on prices and availability for federal exchanges?
My understanding is that we will be putting out some information on rates soon.
And certainly it's important for the navigators to know what kind of products they're selling, and training was essential for that. So they do not have this information yet either?
Navigators will not be selling any products.
They will be advising people about products that they can then choose themselves. Am I correct?
They will be advising, providing information, impartial information about consumers' options for purchasing affordable health care through the marketplaces, yes.
I understand that. which is advising them of the things the person can then choose. So turning to the navigators more. Now, originally this program was intended to cost $54 million, correct?
At one time, we put out a funding opportunity announcement for $54 million.
That's right. And then you ended up spending $67 million, correct?
We increased in order to be able to provide more outreach and more help for people across the country.
On June 2013, a GAO report stated CMS expected to spend $54 million in the program. You familiar with that report?
There have been a lot of GAO reports.
Well, this relates to what you do for a living, so I would hope you would see that one. On July 21st, 2013, CMS Administrator Marilyn Tavener wrote to this committee answering some questions we had about Navigator program. In that letter, she stated that the Navigator program would cost $54 million. 2 weeks later, HHS announced that the Navigator grants would total $67 million, a $13 million increase. So when did HHS make that decision to increase funding for the Navigator program? Do you have any idea the date of that?
I do not.
And what funding did HHS use for this $13 million increase in the budget for what you do?
I'm sure we can get that information for you.
You have no idea. It suddenly appeared and you don't know where it came from.
No, I know that we have had an ongoing interest in making sure that we can do as much outreach and help as many people get enrolled in coverage as possible, and additional resources were located.
Yesterday, the administration announced new initiatives to combat fraud under the health care law by creating a call center along with rapid response measures to address privacy and cybersecurity issues. Can you address what these will entail?
I know that we have a call center now. The call center is live now. I think the announcement was that there will be a way for people to report any instances of fraud, and we are working interagency to work with the FTC, for example, to make sure that the appropriate people get that information.
So you agree the potential for fraud exists then?
Oh, Congressman, there's actually been fraud before the Affordable Care Act, so this is not the first program that's ever been subject to fraud, and I imagine that there will be fraud that occurs.
But you're aware it is a possibility, and you're going to watch this very carefully.
We are.
We will be following up on that. Now, privacy is extremely important. Are the navigators bound by the HIPAA laws with regard to the laws for like healthcare people and?
Well, the navigators will have absolutely no access to personal health information.
But they may get some in the process. Someone may say, which plan will cover? I have this kind of an illness. I have this sort of problem. They may get that, not necessarily soliciting it. And so will there be any laws binding them to confidentiality and not keeping those records?
Well, they are the terms of the grant and the terms of the cooperative agreement that we have with navigators spells out very clearly their obligations with respect to keeping.
Correct, but I know I talked to one navigator group in Pennsylvania who I think is going to do a good job on this because they're already bound by HIPAA laws. But not all have that in terms of how they'll keep their records, what they'll tell employees to do. And so my question is, are there any laws in place that prevent people from maintaining or sharing information that may be healthcare related?
So there are, and the Affordable Care Act in particular provides a $25,000 fine per occurrence if anyone uses any information obtained in the course of helping someone enroll.
That's obligation for the navigators?
Yes.
Okay. Will navigators be going door to door?
We will be issuing instructions to navigators that they should not be going door to door.
So that will be the ruling you'll have. So with 2 weeks left, they would not be doing that.
That's right.
They'll remain in other public places?
They can't be enrolling anyone now because no one can be enrolling now. So in terms of going door to door to solicit people to enroll in coverage, they will be instructed not to do that, and it's timely because no one can be going door to door enrolling anyone because no one can enroll today.
Thank you. I now recognize Ms. DeGette for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, briefly, Mr. Cohen, what is the purpose of the Navigator program?
The purpose of the Navigator program is to educate people with respect to their benefits under the Affordable Care Act and then to provide objective, impartial help to them, if they want it, in finding out what they're eligible for and enrolling in coverage.
And can you move your mic a little closer? Thanks. And who decides who these certified navigators are going to be?
We had a grants process much like every grants process that
So you had a panel that vetted the applications, and they tried to choose people who had experience and some kind of presence in the community, correct?
First, they were screened by the Office of Grants Management at CMS, and then there was an independent panel that selected the ones that had scored highly enough.
And in order to receive a Navigator grant, the applicant has to demonstrate they have existing relationships or could establish relationships with employers. Is that correct?
Correct.
And Navigator awardees have to complete a training program, including 20 to 30 hours of an HHS developed program. Is that right?
That's true.
And they have to pass an exam. Is that right?
Yes.
And part of that exam includes understanding privacy and affordability programs. Is that right?
Yes.
So those people, to get the Navigator grants, they have to certify that they are going to comply with any privacy of HIPAA or any other law. Is that correct?
Right.
Now, under the Affordable Care Act, well, let me back up. Right now, when somebody signs up before the ACA, when they signed up for health insurance, people would often have to fill out applications as long as 35 pages. Is that correct?
That's right.
And those applications included divulging all kinds of personal medical information because that was necessary for the insurance companies to figure out what the insurance rates, because they could discriminate on pre-existing condition and gender and all kinds of other issues, right?
Yes.
But right now, under the ACA, none of that pre-existing condition information is even relevant. Isn't that right?
That's true.
So to sign up on the marketplaces and exchanges, people aren't even going to have to divulge that kind of information. Is that right?
That's true.
So even if a navigator went to the door and was trying to explain to somebody about the exchanges, they wouldn't have to get that information from somebody, right?
It's not part of the application.
Right.
You're right.
But even if somebody just kind of offhandedly talked about their information, the navigator would be trained that that's private, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you some other questions about the marketplaces. Now, are the marketplaces going to be up and going on October 1st?
They will.
Is the federal exchange going to be up and going on October 1st?
It will.
And that goes, as I understand, people can go on their marketplace for a 6-month period to sign up. Is that correct?
That's true.
So if somebody like, for example, a member of Congress wanted to go on the federal marketplace and look and see what plans were available, they could go on October 1st, right?
They will.
But then they would have some additional time to sort through all those plans and figure out what they wanted. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, if they do sign up, their coverage starts January 1st, 2014. Is that right?
That's the earliest it can start, yes.
Right. Now, 23 states, including Colorado and the District of Columbia, are either running their own marketplaces or they're doing a marketplace in partnership with the federal government. Is that correct?
Yes.
Will those states be ready for enrollment for the start of coverage on January 1st?
My understanding from our communications with the states is that all of them will be open enrollment on October 1st.
Okay. Now, can you give me a sense of the milestones and benchmarks that this subcommittee should be looking at to measure the progress over the next few weeks and months? Because we keep hauling people in here. Everybody says they're ready. So I'd like to know, what are the benchmarks that we should be looking for?
Well, I think that there are two types of benchmarks. One are the sort of internal types of benchmarks. How is the call center response time working? How is the website working? You know, those kinds of things. Just how are our systems functioning? And then, of course, there are the external, how many people are getting enrolled. I would say that we don't anticipate a huge amount of enrollment necessarily in October because, as you've pointed out, coverage starts in January, and people have until December 15th to pay their premium.
Okay. And I guess you're prepared, if there are glitches, to address those glitches quickly. Is that right?
Absolutely. We are very well mobilized.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say one more thing. I said this before, but when we did Medicare Part D, even though I voted against it and I opposed it, I did outreach to my constituents, and I've got my newsletter that I sent out to everybody. I'll let you look at it if you want to. We can put it in the record. But I would suggest to everybody on both sides of the aisle, it's incumbent to all of us as elected officials to try to get as many people enrolled in this program as we can who don't have insurance now. I think it would be a good idea. I hope it works, and I think we should all hope it works. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope that all those people from IBM, Xerox, and UPS have been cut from their insurance plan, and we'll be able to look at that. I now yield to the 5 minutes to Mr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cohen, if I heard correctly in response to a question from Chairman Murphy, you said that the navigators would not be going door to door. Is that correct?
The federal grantees will be getting instructions that navigators are not to go door to door for the purposes of enrolling anyone. Yes.
Can I ask you have an evidence binder there next to you. Can I ask you to turn for a moment to tab 2 in that binder? All right, in that project abstract summary, so I assume this is the summary that the company or the group provided you in their application to receive monies from the Navigator Grant Program. The second paragraph of that summary reads, the proposed program will deploy 25 exchange navigators in each of the targeted counties. Exchange navigators will seek out uninsured eligible county residents by going door to door. Is that consistent with your statement to Chairman Murphy that the navigators would not be going door to door?
Sure, we're going to tell them they shouldn't be going door to door, and I'm sure they're going to abide by our
But they
terms and conditions.
applied for a grant, and they told you that they're going to seek out eligible individuals by going door to door. Did you read the application?
So, first of all, I want to say I've never seen this before. I had no role at all in the grant award process. So I'm seeing it for the first time now. I understand that that's what they said in there. I see those words. They're going to be instructed from us
Do you know
as
how
part of our agreement with them not to go door to door, and I'm confident, Congressman, they will obey that instruction.
Well, then I have this question for you. Do you know how much money they received in their grant?
I'd have to look it up.
It was $1.2 million. I'll help you. My next question is, can we have the money back? They provided an application to you, which was approved in the Navigator program, and yet they outlined an activity which you said is going to be expressly prohibited.
I'm confident they will find other activities that will be very well suited to helping people get enrolled in coverage, and that they will be a wonderful grantee.
I am confident the taxpayer would like to have their $1.2 million back if the grant application was approved based on information which you said would make it ineligible for approval.
I didn't say that, Congressman.
Let me ask you this, and I have a series of questions, and in the time-honored tradition of this committee, I'm going to ask for a yes or no response. Will the enrollment process be ready October 1 of this year?
Consumers will be able to go online. They will be able to get a determination of what tax subsidies they're eligible for. They'll be able to look at the plans that are available in where they live. They will be able to see the premium net of subsidy that they would have to pay, and they will be able to choose a plan and get enrolled in coverage beginning October 1st.
Let me rephrase the question. Will the enrollment process be ready by October 1st of this year?
I have nothing further to add to my answer.
Your answer sounded as if it could be a yes, but left room for a no, so we'll mark down an equivocal response to that question. Will the exchanges be ready on January 1st of 2014?
Consumers will be able to, it's the same answer.
Consumers will be able
to go online, get a determination of what they're eligible for in terms of a subsidy, find out what the subsidy amount is. They will then be able to go and look at the plans that are available to them where they live, and they will be able to, and they'll see the premium net of subsidy, and they will be able to choose a plan and get enrolled in a plan beginning October 1st.
And that will be ready on January 1st.
That will be ready on October 1st. That's my understanding, yes.
No, not your understanding. I need a yes or no answer to that. You're in charge.
My answer is based on what I've been told by the people who are building the IT system, so it's my understanding.
Will the full implementation of the law on January 1st cause employers to alter or drop coverage for their employees? Yes or no?
I don't know the answer to that question. I know that employers make lots of decisions for lots of reasons, some having to do with the Affordable Care Act, many having nothing to do with the Affordable Care Act.
Yes, that's a no. Will full implementation of the law on January 1st result in reduced costs for all Americans as routinely promised by their president?
Without accepting your characterization of what the president said, I think what we're seeing is that competition in the marketplaces is causing competitive rates to be available to many consumers.
After full implementation of the law on January 1st, will all Americans still be able to keep their current coverage if they like it, as promised by the president?
Again, without accepting your characterization of what the president said, grandfathered plans are allowed to continue to exist without change under the Affordable Care Act. It's up to private insurance companies what products they offer in the market.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope we have time for additional questions, but I'll yield back at this point.
Sorry, I didn't see. Mr. Dingell, you now recognized for 5 minutes.
I commend you for these hearings. It is important that we have proper, friendly, sympathetic, and intelligent oversight to get this program off its feet and going in the direction that we want it to go. This subcommittee has a long and successful record of conducting such oversight, and it has informed the full committee and the Congress of critical facts. Used properly, strong congressional oversight will lead to much good for the American people. I am fearful that this current investigation into the Navigator program might be turning into something less desirable, and I hope that we will work together to avoid it. One of Michigan's navigators is a group called Access, a community-based social services organization that I've worked with for more than 40 years. There's nobody that knows our communities better than them, and this is exactly the type of group that we should be empowering to help people sign up for health coverage. They're an institution which, believe it or not, serves all parts of the society, all racial groups, all religious groups, and does so without discrimination whatsoever. My questions are going to focus on strong protections that exist in the Navigator program and the status of ACA implementation. My questions will elicit yes or no answers. I'm assuming, Mr. Cohen, that all of your navigators meet all of the standards of any federal government contractor. Is that right?
It's a grant program, yes.
In regards to discipline and integrity and proper behavior. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. And I hope as you need, you will submit additional questions and answers and responses to the question for the record. Are the grants CMS recently awarded to navigators required by the Affordable Care Act? Yes or no?
Yes.
Is the training navigators must go through comparable to the training of agents and brokers who currently sell health insurance? Yes or no?
Yes.
Does the navigator training include information as to how to protect the privacy and security of consumers? Yes or no?
Yes.
Are navigators subject to the same kind of careful screening as other entities seeking to do business with the federal government? Yes or no?
Yes.
Will the navigator grantees be overseen in the same way as other CMS grantees are overseen and held to the terms of their grant?
Yes.
Now I'd like to move to talking more about the opening of the new marketplaces, which are less than 2 weeks away. In 2012, were insurers much less likely than in previous years to request rate increases of 10% or more? Yes or no?
Yes.
Would you submit for the record why that is so?
Yes.
Do you believe that the rate review provision in Affordable Care Act is a factor which led to this behavioral change on the part of insurers? Yes or no?
Yes.
Do you believe that the marketplaces are working as intended by making insurers compete over price for the business of consumers? Yes or no?
Yes.
Is it your expectation that the consumers will have more and better information because of the structure of the marketplaces?
Yes.
Would you submit some additional thoughts on that, please? Now, in the 16 states for which we have data, are preliminary rates for health insurance in the marketplace 19% less expensive than predicted?
Yes.
Would you submit additional comments on that point, please? Have some insurers submitted bids to participate in the marketplace only to revise these bids and reduce their prices when other insurers' rates came in lower? Yes or no?
Yes.
Would you submit additional information on that question, please? Will nearly half of consumers likely be able to pay $100 or less per person for coverage in 2014? Yes or no?
Yes.
Would you submit additional information for the record on that point, please? Now, is it correct that 8 in 10 marketplace consumers are expected to qualify for subsidies to make health coverage more affordable? Yes or no?
Yes.
Would
Yes.
you submit additional comments on that, please? Now, we are just a few days away from seeing the full implementation of the Affordable Care Act. I know that there may be some bumps in the road, but we're headed for the right direction. American people are suggesting us to set politics aside and work together for the common good. I'm hopeful we'll take this as an opportunity to work together in a bipartisan manner. Our constituents expect nothing less than this. One thing happened the other day. A spokesman for our good friend, a former member of this committee, Tom Coburn, now in the Senate, said a government shutdown would be committing ritual suicide on the order of bad strategy, said his communications director in the National Journal Daily. The idea that we can fully defund Obamacare through the continuing resolution is a Washington gimmick to advance political funding goals. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Now recognize Mr. Olson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And welcome again, Mr. Cohen, for returning to answer our questions. I know it's a busy time for you, so I appreciate your time this morning. Since the last time you appeared before this committee, I've been home talking to the people of Texas 22 about the pending Obamacare enrollment on October 1st. Most had not heard of open enrollment. They haven't heard if their employer will continue to provide health care under Obamacare. And now the ones who are working 40 hours per week are hearing they're working at minimum wage, that they may get their wages cut by 25%, down to 30 hours or less per week. But they have heard about navigators, and they're scared. They have a lot of questions, as you can imagine, they want me to ask you. So please give me a direct response and not a filibuster. The first question, there are now 104 entities that are navigators. Is that correct?
I don't know, but we have project officers that are in contact with the navigators on a regular basis and at least weekly, and I'm sure we have that information and be happy to work with you to get it to you.
Okay, about the ones that have been hired, no, you don't know that, but you know how many have completed or begun their training yet?
I do not know.
Okay, about their training, can you provide me some details about their training? I understand it's a 20-hour syllabus. Is it, you said there's some exam at the end. Is that a multiple choice? How does that exam work? Some details about the qualifications process.
It's
open book?
It's a 20-hour exam. It's an online course. You go through the course. As you go through the course, you're asked questions about the material, and you have to score an 80% on each section in order to pass and get certified. Are they required to undergo a background check? Like I'm sure you did to have your job, like I did the Navy. Did navigators have to undergo a background check? So the organizations obviously went through a very rigorous scrutiny process in order to receive the grants. We have not required, the federal government has not required that background checks for the individuals be given, but some states have adopted that as a requirement as they're permitted to do. And so the people on the street are required to get a background check. You're telling me that the entities employing them are, but the people actually knocking on doors, not knocking on doors, but getting the information out, are not required to have a background check. Like the SHIP program, there is no federal requirement for there to be background checks. SHIP people have been helping people with Medicare for many, many years. No background check requirement by the federal government. States, like the SHIP program, are able to impose that requirement if they think that's something that is important in their communities. How about a drug test? You can't get a job out the Texas oil fields without a drug test. How about a navigator? There is no requirement that individual navigators be subject to a drug test, no. How about guidelines? How much those navigators get paid, the people out in the streets? Any idea what the range of their salary is? It's determined by each of the grantees. It's part of the budget that they presented, and the budget proposals were subject to review by the Office of Grants Management at CMS, like every grantee, to make sure that the amounts being paid were reasonable. Does the program have some quality assurance checks, like a so-called secret shopper? Somebody checks up and sees what they're being told. Is it accurate?
You have some sort of program to make sure that people are getting accurate information and checking up on that?
We will be doing ongoing monitoring and oversight of the Navigator program, and it could include Secret Shopper.
And one final question. I was a panelist on a Chamber of Commerce board back home talking about the rollout of Obamacare. And we had a couple state representatives from Texas on that panel with me. One said that he's heard that the navigators who are hitting the streets will have voter registration cards. Have you heard that? Is that true or false?
The federal voter registration law requires that that a public program like Medicaid, in the application, people be offered information about voter registration. That's a federal law requirement, and because the application covers both Medicaid and CHIP and subsidies under the exchanges, we are required to provide information about voter registration to people.
Thank you. My time yield back.
Thank you. Now recognize Ms. Castor for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for calling the hearing. Mr. Cohn, we're not even in the month of Halloween, and yet the Republicans, one of their favorite scare tactics that we hear regarding the ACA is that the Affordable Care Act is going to lead to higher health insurance premiums and rate shock. But while my Republican friends have made every effort to convince Americans that everyone's health insurance premiums are going up on January 1, now we have the data that demonstrates that that is untrue. These assertions that health insurance rates are going up simply is not borne out by a number of analyses that have been conducted. So let's walk through the information on the Affordable Care Act health insurance premiums starting at the beginning. Mr. Cohn, when people shop for coverage through the marketplaces, they will be able to compare plans and then select a plan, sign up for the either private insurance or if they have a state that expanded Medicaid, is that correct? That's right. And if they have a household income below 400% of the poverty level, so if you're an individual at about $46,000 or a family of four at about $94,000 on a sliding scale, you'll be eligible for tax credits. Is that correct?
That's right.
Or Medicaid, possibly.
Correct.
They're at a very low level. Well, this week, HHS released an analysis of census data on the 41 million uninsured Americans. 25% of Floridians are uninsured, so you can see why these new marketplaces will be a godsend for them. But 41 million uninsured Americans who will be eligible to enroll in coverage through the marketplaces. Can you tell us in broad terms what the analysis said?
The analysis said that about 8 in 10 will be eligible for tax credits through the marketplaces. And did it say 23 million will be able to purchase coverage for less than $100 a month? That's correct, including the subsidy, yes. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. Did you have an idea that the coverage would be that affordable? You know, I think there were lots of predictions about what rates would be. I think we've been just enormously pleased that the marketplace and competition is working, and we are seeing the availability of low-cost, affordable plans in many places throughout the country. And these findings have been echoed in recent studies by the nonpartisan RAND Corporation and the nonpartisan Kaiser Family Foundation, two of the most respected nonpartisan health policy analysts. Are you familiar with these studies from RAND and Kaiser? I am generally, yes. Tell us in broad terms what those studies found. Well, Kaiser Family Foundation estimated that in the 18 rating areas, so that's specific geographic locations that they looked at, 15 would have premiums below the latest projections that the CBO had made of what rates would be. And they talked about a premium for a 40-year-old in the second lowest cost silver plan being $320 a month nationally. That's before the application of subsidies. And Mr. Cohn, are the plans available on the Affordable Care Act in the marketplaces, are they a good deal for the quality of coverage that is being offered? Well, that's one of the most important things because these plans all have to have the essential health benefits that are required by the Affordable Care Act, and they cannot have annual limits or lifetime limits. So they're going to be there to provide coverage when people need it. And at the beginning of the hearing, I shared with you and my colleagues the enthusiasm
at home, especially among many of our neighbors who have chronic conditions that have been barred from insurance coverage. If you've had diabetes, or I talked with gentlemen with multiple sclerosis, HIV/AIDS. I mean, we all have neighbors or family members that have been barred from coverage because of these pre-existing conditions. And this is really going to, like I said, it's giving them hope. They can finally now obtain coverage. And so will this high quality coverage that's available for the same price, will it be available for the same price even for many of our neighbors that have those pre-existing conditions?
That's exactly right. They cannot be charged more because of a pre-existing condition.
So every Republican analysis of premiums under the ACA, if you notice, they ignore these key facts, that coverage has gotten better, that bar against discrimination for our neighbors who have these pre-existing conditions now will go away for 129 million Americans. And they ignore the tax credits. In my state of Florida, they said, let's conduct a study and we'll show you that it's not affordable. But then they didn't build into the study the tax credits that are available for families and neighbors and small businesses too. And then the one that really takes the cake, do you know about, in my home state, I love my state, but we need help when it comes to health care coverage. But one of the things they did, it probably wins the award for obstruction and sabotage, is they actually took away the insurance commissioner's ability to regulate rates and negotiate rates. Is there any other state that has done that, to your knowledge?
I don't believe so. And, you know, I was a state regulator. I was general counsel of the California Insurance Department, and I know Kevin McCarty very well, and it's an excellent insurance department, and it's unfortunate that their authority was taken away.
Thank you very much.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Now go to Mr. Johnson of Ohio for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cohen, first of all, good morning. Thank you for being here today. First question for you. Whose department is responsible for overseeing and administering these grants to the navigators?
It's a combination of my office and our Office of Grants Management, both within CMS.
Okay, but you are responsible for overseeing that process, correct?
When
You're
you
the
say
director.
process,
Yeah, the grant process.
the process of selecting the grantees or the process of overseeing the grantees and their work?
Process of overseeing and selecting.
Well, so I personally had no role in the selection process. We do that through an independent review panel.
But you oversee it, correct?
Well, I had no role in the selection process.
No, but who oversees the grant process? What is your role in the grant process?
So in the grant selection process, I had no role.
What is your role in the grant process? I didn't say the grant selection process. What is your role in the grant process?
My office is responsible for overseeing the grantees' performance now that they've received.
Okay, did you review the criteria for the grant applications to be reviewed?
I did.
You did, okay. Well, because earlier when you were asked, you said, I don't know. Repeatedly you said, I don't know, didn't have anything to do with that.
No, that's not what I said. I didn't review the applications. I certainly was part of putting together what the program would be because that's part of my job. But
okay, the criteria for reviewing the grants. You stated in your answer to Dr. Burgess that when he asked you, could we get the money back for those that are doing processes like door-to-door that are going to be prohibited, you said that you were confident that they would find other activities. You know, I find this rather an odd way of going about spending the taxpayer dollars. Because, I mean, if you don't know where you're going, obviously any road will get you there. This is consistent with the theme of let's pass the health care law so we can see what's in it. Now, you're trying to tell the American people that we ought to award millions of dollars in grants and then find out how they're going to spend it. I would submit to you that that's exactly the kind of irresponsible governance and irresponsible administration that the American people have become so frustrated with. And leaders who purport themselves to be directors, head of agencies, that feign, I don't know, and try to shrug our shoulders and say, I didn't have anything to do with that. It's disingenuous, Mr. Cohen.
Well, I
First question. When you were evaluating
with your characterization of what I said.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Cohen, let me ask you a question. When you were evaluating the Navigator grant program, were there standards on the appropriate amount of grant spending per enrollee or per individual contacted about enrollment? You told me you reviewed the criteria, so were there any standards about that?
I reviewed the criteria for the program.
So then you should answer yes or no.
I was not involved in the budget discussions with each grantee over what
was
their
there
costs would
in the grant process. You told me you reviewed the criteria. You just got done saying that. Were there any standards on the appropriate amount of grant spending per enrollee? That's a very simple question.
I don't recall.
You don't recall. You don't know.
I don't recall.
Goes back to my first statement. Were there any standards or minimums on the number of health fairs attended or individuals contacted via advertisements?
I doubt that the funding opportunity announcement was.
Tell me what you know about the criteria. You reviewed the criteria. Tell me what you know about the criteria.
We put out a funding opportunity announcement that describes the program.
No, I don't want you to tell me what you did. I want you to tell me what the criteria was. What's the criteria for a grant?
I don't know how to answer.
You don't know.
I don't know how to answer your question.
No, you don't know.
No.
And that's appalling to me. Turn to Exhibit 1, please. I think it's reprehensible that you will come before the American people as a director of a department and you don't know. You sit there and tell me that you review the grant process, you review the criteria, and yet you don't know. You can't give the first sentence about that criteria. Turn to Exhibit 1, please.
I have it.
Okay. This is a Navigator grant application provided to the committee by the administration. It shows a Navigator applicant who expects to facilitate enrollment of 312 people into qualified health plans. You awarded this organization approximately $80,000 of taxpayer money for only 300 people. Now, I acknowledge you said you didn't have anything to do with the grant award, but you set up the criteria. Do you believe that this is an efficient use of taxpayer dollars? I can do the quick math. That's $266
Gentleman's
per
time
person.
has expired. You may go over second round, so if you have more questions, I'll let you come back to that.
Am I already
We'll let you answer.
Oh, I'm not even checking the clock. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
We can go back.
As I said,
Well, I'd like to. We'll answer the question.
I literally have not seen this before today. I am happy to go back and look at it and answer your questions. I just can't do that today.
I'm not surprised you haven't.
We'll get that information.
I'm not surprised
because I was not part of the grant application and award process for reasons that I'm sure you understand.
We'll follow up with that. Mr. Waxman is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Cohen, do you approve the budgets of the Navigators?
I did not.
No, do you?
No, I don't, personally.
You don't?
No.
Your agency doesn't?
Yes.
Your agency does?
Yes.
Okay. So what you did is help establish the criteria for awarding these grants to navigators who will help people know what insurance options are available to them and help them sort through a new law that they've heard a lot of negative things about from partisan Republicans who want to demonize the idea that people will be able to get insurance. I think that the questions you just had were off the mark and not appropriate for Congress. I don't think we ought to beat up on people because they don't like the law. So the criteria is to select people who can do the job as navigators, right?
Yes.
And you had something to do with that?
Correct.
Okay. And then the grants that are made to different applicants to be the navigators, who decides that?
We have a process for our Office of Grants Management. This is the same as every grant. CMS awards a lot of grants.
Yeah.
Every grant goes through a screening process where they review the application, they review the management of the applicant, they review the budget, they score them. Mm-hmm. That then goes to an independent review committee that makes the selections based on the criteria and the purposes of the program.
So there's no one has a basis for criticizing you for what an independent grant committee reviews and decides. Isn't that correct?
I agree with you.
Okay. Look, I don't even know what this hearing is all about. We've had so many hearings by the Republicans to beat up on the Affordable Care Act. They don't like it. I got the idea. When they wanted to repeal it, they could have gotten the message out by asking us to vote for 5 times. Instead, they voted 41 times. It's because they have nothing else to do but attack this Affordable Care Act. And why do they want to do that? Because they want to confuse people. They want to scare people. That's what this hearing's all about. And in fact, the people who are doing the work of navigators, are called, are now being intimidated by the Republicans who's getting a long list of questions asking them, did they do something wrong? I gather. That seems to me so unfair. You've got a clinic, you've got people that work in a homeless shelter, you've got people who work with an ethnic community, people who are there in the community and know the community well, and they have been selected and had to go through tests and classes to be good navigators, and they're going to do their job. And now they get letters from members of Congress asking them to fill out answers to a long list of questions. You know what kind of questions they've been asked?
They've been asked very detailed questions about both the application process and about what their plans are for what they're going to do before they've even started work, before they've even hired their staff.
Well, this is nothing but intimidation by this committee. Congress has a lot of power. When the chairman or a member gets the chance to ask questions, that's a lot of power. But what we need to do is restrain ourselves from abusing that power. And I haven't seen much restraint around here. And I understand one navigator's already dropped out of the program because they just said, we don't have enough money to do the work of answering questions from Congress as well as reaching out to the community. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's true. And I've heard from others that are very concerned. They don't know what to do in response to this to these inquiries that they've gotten.
I just think this is such an abuse of power to intimidate navigators who are going to explain the new law to people. In California, we're running the program, and we license people who sell private insurance. And the state has taken over the responsibility of approving the navigators, hasn't it?
Yes.
So they have a job to do. They've been checked out to be sure they're people who are capable of doing the job. We don't call in private insurance salesmen to ask them a whole bunch of questions, but when they're trying to just get the community to understand something new, this committee abuses its power and wants to ask all sorts of questions. And at a time when they're trying to run this program, with a couple of weeks left before the opening of the exchanges.
And I would just add, if I might, that any state that wanted to run their navigator program had the ability to do that, either by operating its own marketplace or by being a consumer assistance partner with us. They could have taken over the whole thing.
Well, my state's doing a good job. We're going to have a great success in California. I think we're going to have success around the country unless Republicans intimidate people, whether it's at the state level or the federal level, to scare them about the idea that they can get insurance that's been denied them in the past. And the Republicans said nothing about it, but denied them in the past because they had pre-existing medical conditions or they couldn't afford the insurance policy. And so I don't know what this hearing's all about except to intimidate people. And I resent it, Mr. Chairman, and I resent the kind of questions that our witness has just been subjected to by my colleague. Yield back my time.
Well, gentlemen, gentlemen, ask yield for a question or a query. You had made a reference to California is taking over these things. They also have laws for insurance agents who sell these policies.
Yes.
Are you saying that they would be under the same guidance or rules or regulations as insurance agents? Could you clarify that for the record?
Well, Mr. Cohen could probably do it better, but as I understand it, California is going by the standards set by the federal government. Isn't that right? Well, why don't you answer me?
Well, California, because it's operating its own marketplace, has its own navigator program, and it it's not requiring navigators to be agents and brokers. We've issued regulations saying that states may not do that, but it has put in additional requirements above and beyond the federal requirement, as states may do.
Well, just for clarification, I'm just confused because I know many states have rules about continuing education, fingerprinting, background checks, licensing, tests for agents. So if they're under the California program, they're not going to be part of those same sort of rules? There's a separate
I'm not
level
100% familiar with what California is doing, but I believe that California is requiring background checks and fingerprints.
Could you just let us know on some states on that? Yeah, thank you very much. Now recognize Mr. Scalise for 5 questions. 5 minutes.
Hopefully I can get to more than 5 questions, but I will do my best to get through the questions I have. And Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for having this committee. I think it's important that we have oversight over a program that's involving not only $67 million of taxpayer money, but a new program where these navigators, people will be going throughout America trying to sign people up for the President's health care law that's missed so many deadlines, that's had so many problems. For somebody to kind of insinuate that we should not be asking real tough questions. American people have tough questions. That's why they sent us here. I would hope, Mr. Cohen, you're here to give straightforward answers to the questions that people have. And anybody who thinks that sunshine and transparency will undermine the law, maybe they're right. Maybe the fact that more people find out about this law, they don't like it. That's not our fault. That's the fault of such a bad law that the more people find out about it, they don't like it.
I always do my best, Congressman, to answer the questions.
I appreciate that. And do you think any of these are unfair questions?
I think I better not respond to that one.
Well, yeah. Not only you're under oath, but the president that you work for, the president ran on a campaign promise that he'd be the most transparent president ever. And all of a sudden we start asking basic questions, and people are feigning that this is, that we shouldn't be asking tough questions because, boy, that poor president, it might make his law look bad if people find out just what's in it.
Congressman, I have no problem with asking questions to me. This is the 7th time that I've testified before a congressional committee or subcommittee since December. I've always done my best to answer the questions. I've always done my best to provide additional information when I wasn't able to answer the questions.
I just want to make sure,
the concern that I have,
you're trying to give,
the concern that I have,
not have questions.
The concern, any questions you have for me or for us,
I want to ask you about background.
The concern that I have is for the scrutiny that these navigator groups were put under even before they ever started their work.
And I would ask you to get the committee the name of any navigators who dropped out of the program because of scrutiny. I would ask you can you get that information to this committee?
Yes.
Because if any navigator dropped out of the program because they didn't want to be held accountable for the taxpayer money they're receiving, they don't belong in the program. They ought to get out of the program.
That wasn't the reason.
Well, then let's see the names of those people, and we'll follow up.
The reason that it was.
We're asking real questions. They ought to be providing answers just like you should.
That wasn't the reason.
They're getting taxpayer money. I want to ask you about criminal background checks. This is a big concern of a lot of people. I know in my district, and when I talk to colleagues, others. Why is it that you did not choose to include background checks on people that are going to be going around asking people for very secured personal information about their health?
First of all, they're not going to be asking people information about their health.
These people are going to be having conversations with navigators about health care.
They're not going to be asking.
They're going to be trying to give them advice, aren't they, about what kind of health care options they have in these exchanges?
They're not going to be asking people for information about their health. That's not part of the application.
Are they going to be asking what their
football
team is? Or are they going to be asking them health care questions?
They are not going to be asking them for information about their health. It's not part of the application.
So let me ask you this. If somebody just got released from prison for a conviction on identity theft, would that person be eligible to be a navigator? Yes or no? You're under oath.
I am confident that the organizations that we have given grants to...
Can they be eligible? Are they eligible? It's a yes or no question. I'm sure what you hope is, if you hope that they're not eligible, why didn't you make that a rule? Am I incorrect in saying that a person who was just released from prison on identity theft can be a navigator under your rules? Is that an inaccurate statement?
We have had experience...
Because I'm making that statement right now. Your rules allow someone who committed identity theft to be eligible to be a navigator. If I'm saying anything incorrect, you just correct me right now.
We have had experience for many, many years with the SHIP program. There is no federal requirement for background checks in the SHIP program.
So that person,
I am
my
not
statement's
aware.
correct. If you correct me, then I'll stop saying it. But I just made a statement. If I said anything inaccurate, please correct me. But if you don't, I'll keep making that statement.
There is no federal requirement for background checks or
Okay, so
criminal
then I'm
record
correct
checks
there.
in the
Let me ask you this.
Navigator
You
program.
listed off
Some states.
Was there a concern?
Excuse me.
No, that's my time, but he didn't answer my question.
Mr.
I asked for a
Chairman,
yes
point
or
of
no
order.
answer.
The gentleman ought to be given the courtesy to answer
And he
a
will be given the
question.
courtesy. I'll ask one follow-up question, and I'll let you have the
Mr. Chair,
time.
I ask for your support here in being able to answer these questions.
One more question we're going to
The
give
question I have is, were you concerned that invoking criminal background checks might limit the number of people that would apply to be navigators?
Now, Mr. Cohen, you may answer the question.
We want to get as many. We had a number of factors. It was not clear to us that we have the authority to require the criminal background checks, and we wanted to make it. We left it up to the states to determine whether that was a requirement that they wanted to impose.
So that was a yes or no question I asked. I would just ask if you could give a yes or no answer to a yes or no question. Were you concerned that invoking criminal background checks might limit the number of people that would apply to be navigators?
The cost and the difficulty of doing criminal background checks, yes, we were concerned about that.
Can I know the gentleman's time expired. Mr. Cohen, would you be able to, at some point in the near future, provide with us information on, you said some states have it, some states don't, just so we can have that.
Sure.
And assist those issues. Obviously, it's a concern, I think, for members on both sides of the aisle to make sure that the people coming through are trustworthy. Who's that? Now recognize Mr. Tomko for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Cohen, thank you for returning to the committee and for your diligent work thus far in trying to implement probably the biggest reform to our nation's healthcare system in our history. This is no small task, and so we all appreciate, I would hope we all appreciate, the commitment and grace you have shown in taking on this work. And I have some questions, and I'll allow you to answer them and not talk over you. We've understandably heard a lot already today about the exchanges, which are the most visible piece of the ACA. So I wanted to take the time to ask you about some of the other insurance reforms under ACA that your center is responsible for. Under the ACA, the center is charged with providing support to consumers when insurance companies deny payment for a service or treatment, which have coverage guaranteed under ACA, such as preventative services. One such example of a guaranteed benefit under ACA is BRCA testing and genetic counseling for women meeting certain risk criteria for hereditary breast and ovarian cancer. However, I've heard reports of several women in New York who have been denied BRCA testing despite meeting the criteria for testing and receiving medical advice to have the testing done. My understanding is that this should not happen and that your center is charged with ensuring that it doesn't. What resources and assistance does the center offer for consumers who need to appeal health insurance claims decisions, and where can consumers gain easy access to these resources?
So there is a requirement under the Affordable Care Act for an external appeal process after someone goes through the process through their insurance carrier. New York is probably running that appeals process. I'd have to go back and look. Some states are doing it. In some cases, it's the federal government is doing it if the state doesn't have a process that meets the required standard. In addition, we work very closely with the state departments of insurance when we learn of something that is a systemic problem. So if it's not just one particular individual or two, but it looks as though a particular carrier or even more broadly all the carriers in a market or whatever are not abiding by the provisions of the Affordable Care Act, we work very closely with state insurance departments to make sure that they do.
Thank you. And perhaps if you could look more closely at that specific situation, I would appreciate it.
We'd be happy to.
As you know, the implementation of the Affordable Care Act will extend federal parity protections from Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act to more than 62 million Americans. However, given the delay in issuing final parity regulations, it is doubtful the American people will enjoy the full protections of mental health parity consistent with the spirit of that legislation as the ACA goes into full effect in 2014. With another terrible tragedy unfolding again this week here in D.C., the need for a robust national commitment to mental health has been highlighted yet again. We've heard from numerous administration officials that a final mental health parity regulation would be finished by the end of the year, a date which is rapidly approaching. Can you provide us with any more details on when to expect any such final parity rule?
So we have committed that there will be a rule out by the end of the year. I'm confident there will be. I know work is ongoing. I've been to meetings where we've been reviewing the provisions of the final rule. It's moving through our process. I can't give you an exact date of when it will be coming out, but it will be coming out by the end of the year.
Okay. And can you describe in detail the current investigation and enforcement process that your office goes through when it receives a complaint about parity violations?
Sure. So as with many federal law provisions, HIPAA and mental health parity, again, the states are the principal primary enforcer. So what we typically do when we hear about problems, and we do have a hotline where people can call and you know, tell us about problems they're having with their insurance company, we generally will reach out first to the State Department of Insurance. There have been some instances since I've been at CCIIO where the state has told us that they're not able to deal with the problem, and we have dealt directly with the insurance companies to make sure that they are complying.
Mm-hmm.
We've also done some outreach and education because I know that the requirements of the mental health parity law are not as well known and understood, and so we've been doing some outreach and education both to the issuer community and to the state insurance departments to make sure they understand the provisions of the law.
When these investigations, Mr. Cohen, are of parity violations are conducted, are the results of these investigations made public?
It depends. What we try to do normally is get compliance, and if we're able to get compliance, then and there's no administrative action that's begun, then typically that would not be public. If we go to the point of actually beginning administrative action and the possible imposition of civil monetary penalties, that would be public.
I know my 5 minutes are up, and with that, I thank
recognize
the chair
Mr.
for
Harper
the
for 5 minutes.
opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cohen, good to see you again, and have a few questions. If I could get you to look in the notebook and turn to Exhibit 4 for just a moment, please. Exhibit 4. And if you'll look at that, you'll see that number 14 says incentives for quality connections, and the second sentence states they, meaning navigators, have the opportunity to earn $200 additional per quarter if they meet a standard of 300 enrollments or screenings during the quarter. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you believe it's appropriate to pay navigators for the number of individuals enrolled?
In the federal program, we are not permitting navigators to be paid by the number of enrollments. I understand this is an application, and it may be what they thought that they were going to do, but we are not permitting that.
So what are they getting? Just a straight salary, or a straight regard? So they get paid the same. You're saying this is not true?
This is an application,
okay.
But I'm telling you that in the federal program, navigators are not being paid by the number of enrollees.
Okay, but didn't you approve this application?
I did not, but there's a budget process that happens.
Somebody approved the application.
Yes, we did. We did. Okay, so there's a budget process that goes through before a grant is awarded, and I don't know the specifics of this particular applicant, but I am confident that the budget that was worked out with this applicant did not include payment per enrollee.
Can you check that to be
100%
sure and get back with us on that in writing on that? So,
I would be happy to.
So is there another application, another form that we should be looking at?
Well, there's a grant award. There's a cooperative agreement between the grantee and CMS. Yes.
All right,
this is just the application.
Sure. Let me at least
part of the application.
Well, let me ask you this: if this were true, would you believe that we should be incentivizing navigators to enroll as many people as possible?
In the federal program, we made the decision not to permit compensation based on number of enrollees.
Okay, well, you know but this is a document that you provided to us, if I'm not mistaken.
It's an application.
Okay. Well, and that's what I'm referring to as a document. So just so I'm clear, are you saying then that no navigator is being paid additional money or bonus money by the number of people signed up? That's what you're saying?
In the federal program, correct.
All right. Well, what about in any other program or other entity?
My understanding is that there may be some states that are paying.
Okay. And
paying some portion of compensation per
and
enrollee.
you would know which states those are, correct?
We can get that information.
Would you do that, and
Sure.
what amount? And if they're paying all navigators a bonus based upon numbers, I would want to know that. All right, are you going to issue any type of statement or standards for navigators or to the states directing them not to do this?
No, we've left, I mean, the states, as throughout the Affordable Care Act, we've given the states a lot of flexibility to design their programs in the way that they think is best for their state. And so we're not telling states that they can't do it. In the federal program, navigators are not being paid per enrollee.
All right, following up on other questions, my understanding what you're saying is that navigators are not subjected to, or a criminal background check is not done, correct?
There is no federal requirement for a criminal background check.
Okay.
Some states are imposing a criminal background check requirement on navigators.
But it's not your requirement, federal requirement to do
Correct.
that.
That's right.
But the navigators, though, are going door to door on some situations, correct?
Navigators will be told that they should not go door to door to solicit people to enroll in coverage.
They're being told not to.
Not to.
Okay. Do you know if they are doing that on in the state level?
I don't.
Okay. Can you let us know that too, please?
I can
That's
try
one
to
of,
find
one
that
of the
out.
things there. If I could get you now to turn to Exhibit number 8. Exhibit 8 is a work plan from one approved navigator. If you look through, you will see it promises to complete 24,000 robocalls in the first quarter, 72,000 robocalls in the second quarter, another 72 in the third, and 72,000 more in the fourth quarter. You see that document?
Yes.
Do you believe that navigators should be using taxpayer dollars to fund robocalls?
You know, I'm going to have to check to see what our instructions are going to be about that. My understanding generally is that our expectation is that when it comes to enrollment assistance, we're expecting that people are going to come to the navigators rather than the navigators going to them.
Sure, but this is an application that was approved. So this was an approved application, was it?
This grantee was awarded a grant. It doesn't mean that every single thing in the application ended up in the final grant award.
But they were awarded a grant, and that application did call for robocalls that you saw. Okay, yield back.
Thank you. Gentleman's time expired. Now to go to Mr. Green for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cohen, let me explain to you the district I represent. I have a very urban district in Houston and has some of the highest in the country of uninsured. Hidalgo County and far South Texas, the numbers in my district compared to far South Texas, one of the poorest counties in the country. Some of the questions you're hearing and looking at the exhibits, I know my navigators are not going door to door. They're prohibited from doing it. But Enroll America, which is a nonprofit group, is doing that. In fact, I asked them to do that in my district. I want them to be out there making people know that this law is available. What you're hearing today is folks who don't like the law, and that's okay. They didn't vote for it. But they're trying to keep it from actually working. And in a district like I have, this is a way those folks can go and have insurance for their families. And so it's frustrating to me when they were talking about, fingerprinting. Under state law, maybe my insurance agents are fingerprinted and do background checks. I'm not sure, but it's not in the federal law to do that. And so in the state of Texas, that's not an issue. Now, insurance agents may be able to, but we don't hold these navigators to a higher standard than the federal law is. So, again, their complaint is that they really don't want the navigators to do their job to sign people up who come in. It's also, I would be offended if somebody asked if I had to ask my insurance agent, by the way, do you have a background check? That's just amazing that some of my colleagues would do it. But again, their point is they don't like the law, and they're trying to use any way they can to discredit it. But it is working. I did an event in our district. We're doing more events in our district because we want that outreach to be there. Let me ask you something. One of the questions about the navigators being paid incentives, and I'm looking at exhibit number 4 on page 10. Navigators are paid a base wage of $10 an hour. With the expectation of meeting basic performance guidelines, they'll have the opportunity to earn $200 more per quarter if they meet 300 enrollment screenings. Federally qualified health center employees, I know in my district, they have positions to be able to sign people up. We're talking about some of the folks who make some of the lowest wages that we can imagine. And it sounds like, to me, it'd be a Republican thing to incentivize them to actually go out and do it correctly. And that's what I think that's welcome to Congress. But let me talk a little bit about one of the issues that have come up, and I've heard it a lot. On the floor last week, we were forced to vote on a bill that would force the HHS-IG to take unprecedented role of certifying marketplace verification systems before people could get financial assistance. I want to ask you a series of questions about that. When an individual applies for financial assistance through the marketplaces, what steps are taken on the front end to verify that they're not underreporting their income in order to get financial assistance?
We check against available sources of data, including Internal Revenue Service data, including Social Security Administration data, and if necessary, private employer data through a database that's also part of that system to
So you have access to the IRS database, and you also can be checked against Equifax, for example, for current information.
Right.
So there is upfront verification. What about on the back end? If an individual's taxes at the end of the year indicate they're not eligible for that financial assistance, what do they have to do?
The IRS is going to require that they reconcile that at the end of the tax year, and if they have to pay money back, they'll have to pay money back.
Well, and I know most folks, the last thing they want to hear is that the IRS is going to come audit you because you claimed less income than you actually earned, and you're going to pay this back. Is there a penalty for them under, I assume under IRS regs, there's probably a penalty that would be added not only to the back taxes, but to the penalty.
And in addition, the information that they provide, it says right in the application, it's being provided under penalty of perjury, and that there are penalties just for submitting false information if it's done, intentionally.
My Republican friends have repeatedly asserted that the ACA would be rife with fraud and suggested people would be lining up improperly to get financial assistance. First of all, the financial assistance provided through the marketplace it only be used to purchase health insurance.
That's right.
It's not correct they get a direct cash assistance or sent to people's homes. That's incorrect.
The money goes directly from to the insurance company that they've chosen. Yep.
And since they won't even see the money, it would be credit applied against insurance premiums. It seems unlikely that people are out there waiting to profit from this program and to put money in their pockets when they won't even see the money. Can you tell us about the uninsured who are using the exchanges in particular? And again, state of Texas, we have to have a national exchange. And I appreciate other states who took the incentives on their own, but I also know HHS is supposed to put more resources in the states that don't have a state partner. So I appreciate that coming to Texas. In particular, I want to address unfair the allegation I heard that people who buy insurance in exchanges are fraudsters and deadbeats. Is there any information on that? All people are looking for is to be able to cover their families with health care. And that's an opportunity to do it.
They just want to take care of themselves and their families. That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Ms. Elmers, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Cohen, for being with us again. I think you said this is the 7th time. Is that correct?
Not before this committee, obviously, but yes, it's the 7th time I've testified since December.
On the Hill, okay.
Yep.
Well, first off, I do want to go back to one of the comments that you made about how you believe that there is competition that is being created amongst the insurance companies with the exchanges. Very recently, I believe as recent as last week, in North Carolina, in my district, First Carolina Care Insurance Company announced that they will not be part of the exchange. They supply health insurance to thousands in my district. This means less options for my constituents, and now I believe for North Carolina there are only 2 insurance companies. How does this provide competition?
So the results are different from state to state. In many states we've seen new entrants coming in and a lot of choice, and in other states we've seen less.
Okay.
As I think you probably know, the existing market is extremely highly concentrated in some states.
Okay. But for my reclaiming my time, so
yep.
my North Carolina constituents though will have less competition.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what's available to them off the marketplace.
Let's move on because they live in North Carolina. I'd like for you to move to Exhibit 7, and this is part of the approved application process. Now, in Exhibit 7, it says that the applicant basically is going to spend money on participant incentives by purchasing and giving out gift cards to obtain consumer feedback on assistance provided and consumer knowledge from the satisfaction of the events. Do you believe that this is an appropriate use for the navigators to entice individuals with gift cards?
Well, it doesn't sound as though it's enticing. It sounds like they want to get feedback, and in order to encourage people to give them feedback, they're going to give them. I know that.
So, are you sure that the idea of the gift card? I mean, so they would get. So you know for sure that they would be, basically given the information, and then they would. You don't see that as enticement?
That's what it looks like to me from here, but I can check.
So just to clarify, you don't believe that this is enticement?
It doesn't look like it, no.
Okay. Well, I would like to go back to a couple of the other issues. Now we've seen repeatedly that there are many questions based on the letter that we put out asking the navigators. And of course, those on the other side of the aisle are saying that this is intimidation, and certainly they have quoted me as well, and I don't believe that Congress asking questions and doing oversight is intimidation at all. We are charged with making sure that taxpayer dollars are utilized correctly, and I know that oversight is very important for you as well. I'd like to also go to the point here where it says in a response, and I'd like to submit this for the record, although we have it, that basically HHS reported that we trust that our response fully addresses your questions about the Navigator program and the guidelines and controls in place to monitor the work of the awardees. Now, there are a number of these situations where you're going to be getting back to us with answers. Is that correct? Some of the different applicants, the questions that have been posed to you, it's unclear at this point how it's being implemented, and you've repeatedly said that you would get back with information and written statements.
Right, and I have no objection or question whatsoever about questions about this program directed to us.
Okay, so do you not see that as a basis for a delay at this point, that we would just continue to move on with this process, even though it's very, very unclear as to how these applicants are really going to be utilizing good, hard-earned taxpayer dollars?
No, I don't.
So you believe that we should continue as is?
Absolutely.
Regardless of being able to report back to Congress on this issue, so that we can make sure that the taxpayers of this country know that their dollars are being utilized? I
don't think that your questions are a basis for delay.
So if I am a taxpayer, obviously. So if you were speaking to one of my constituents right now, a little lady that lives down the street from me, would you say, based on all of these questions that have been posed, that her taxpayer dollars are being utilized well?
Absolutely, and I would say that she
Thank
should
you.
be
Well,
very
you
proud.
answered my question,
She should
but
be
I
very
would
proud.
also like to submit for the record to the point about the issue of undermining and being aggressive in this effort. There's an article in the Business Journal Thursday, September 12th, 2013, and I would like to submit this for the record, where my office actually reached out to Randolph Hospital, who is a Navigator applicantee, and let me just read a quote from them. From my perspective and the hospital's perspective, we just see this as they're doing their due diligence and making sure the organizations that receive these funds are going to be used, and the funds in the manner in which they were intended, said Devin Griffith, Vice President of Care Continuum and Support Services in Randolph. We don't foresee this as being a problem. Thank you very much. I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentlelady yields back, and now our new member, Mr. Yarmouth, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the courtesy of the committee, and I'm very honored to be a part of the committee, even though it appears I just joined a game of Trivial Pursuit that we're worried about $10 gift cards when we're talking about a law that will affect 300 million Americans. Before I get into one line of questioning, I'd like to kind of plug my home state of Kentucky. Kentucky has embraced the Affordable Care Act. Our governor has taken the opportunity to provide insurance to 640,000 Kentuckians who are currently uninsured. We have an exchange that is a model, I think, for the country. It's called Connect, K-Y-N-E-C-T. And one of the great ironies of this debate is that during our state fair last month. Connect had a booth, a lot of people curious about what was available to them under the law. And after talking to the people at Connect, they walked away, many of them saying, wow, this is a lot better than Obamacare. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. There have been a couple of comments earlier today that related to moves that certain corporations have made, and Republicans have pounced on them as kind of making an argument that they were somehow precipitated by the Affordable Care Act and somehow resulted in a negative outcome. One of them is UPS. UPS, it's not based in my district, but the global hub is there. They're our largest employer. So when I heard about the fact that they were asking those employees who had spouses who are eligible for coverage through another employer to take their coverage there, and they were going to stop providing dependent coverage to them, that this was somehow something that the Affordable Care Act forced them into. Republicans pounced on that. My Senator Mitch McConnell did. So I talked to the UPS executives about this, and they actually said, no, we're very upset about the way Republicans have used this, because what the Affordable Care Act did was allow us to make this business move, which a number of companies have done, and preserve our coverage at current rates and current contributions for our employees, about 15,000 out of the 770,000 lives that they insure. And so it basically was nothing that the Affordable Care Act did that resulted in a negative outcome. But my question to you, Mr. Cohen, is before the Affordable Care Act, could UPS have done what they did?
You know, I'm not familiar with that particular circumstance, but I don't believe so.
But UPS could have dropped their coverage entirely before the Affordable Care Act.
Of course.
UPS could have made any changes they wanted to, could have,
yes,
could have given, provided inferior coverage, anything they wanted to.
Correct.
And we all know that, I think most of us know, that when President Obama said, if you like your coverage, you can keep it, what he meant was that nothing in the Affordable Care Act would force an employer to change their coverage. Not that there might not be changes. In fact, some might be an improvement. And the issue of Walgreens was mentioned earlier today. Walgreens has decided to set up a private exchange for its employees, not shoving them into any exchanges, but any government exchanges. So they've just chosen to make an alternative arrangement for providing insurance for their 160,000 employees. Isn't that correct?
That's what I understand.
And when they announced it, they said the reason we were able to do that, the reason we wanted to do it is because of the private exchanges, we can actually expand the options that were available for our employees. Right now, they said there are only 2 high deductible plans, so we can improve their situation. So you could actually make an argument, I think, and I'll make the argument, that because of the Affordable Care Act and the creation of exchanges and the success that the exchanges seem to have project in terms of increased competition, lowering costs, that this gave Walgreens an opportunity to improve the situation with their employees. Would you agree you could make that argument?
I agree, and I think it's important to recognize that for many, many years, employers have been struggling with the ever-increasing cost of health care and of health insurance, double-digit increases year after year. And what we've seen in the last few years are significantly lower increases in the cost of health premiums. And I think we'll continue to see that even more when the Affordable Care Act is fully implemented, and there's a lot less uncompensated care that all businesses have to pay for in their rates because more people will have coverage.
Okay. And as a reminder, when we go back to the year that this law was being debated in 2009, premiums for businesses were going up in many places as high as 38%. I think in California, Blue Cross Blue Shield said everybody's getting a 38% increase. So we've seen a dramatic improvement since that time.
That's right.
Yeah, thank you very much for your testimony. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I yield back.
Chairman yields back, and now go to Dr. Gingrey for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Cohen, I'm going to read out to you some statistics which you may or may not agree with. But a number of years ago, the United States Census Bureau came out with an estimate of 47 million people in this country without health insurance. They got this information basically by calling and saying, Do you have health insurance? Yes or no? If they had just lost their job and been off of health insurance for 1 week, the answer was no. If the call had been received 2 weeks later, the answer very well may have been yes. So 47 million people without health insurance is one thing, but if it were for a full year without health insurance, that would be a horse of an entirely different color. And in that 47 million, let's just assume there really were 47 million people who went uninsured for a full year. 18 million of those people make more than $50,000 a year. 18 million of the 47. 10 million, it's estimated, of those 47 million are in this country illegally. 14 million are eligible for a safety net program, S-CHIP, Medicaid. They just don't bother to fill out the paperwork, or maybe they don't know, maybe they haven't been informed. But when you get right down to it, there are probably no more than 8 to 10 million people in this country that do not have health insurance because they're nearly poor. They're not eligible for Medicare. They're not eligible for Medicaid. So the number was so grossly inflated. And so when I hear from the other side of the aisle that we Republicans were totally opposed to this bill, well, yeah, we were. And that's one of the main reasons we were. Now, another statistic, 1950, the average individual spent $500 a year on health care. In 2006, the latest year that I have statistics for, the average individual probably spent $7,000 a year for health care. But look at the life expectancy. The life expectancy in 1950 was the late 50s. The life expectancy in 2006, 2007, indeed today, is 80 years old practically. So the value, yes, health cost in this country is too high, and we need to constantly fight to lower it, find ways to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse, anything that we can do to bring it down. But what is the value of each additional year of a person's life because of what we have done? Yes, because it's costly, but that's because of research and development, durable medical equipment, medical devices, well-trained physicians, super specialists, outstanding drugs, antibiotics, 6th generation now because of the GAIN Act. So, of course, we were opposed to this bill. Now, look, let me get directly to a question for you. In 2 weeks, the rules say that the sign-up period on the exchanges commences. Will individuals be able to sign up for a health insurance plan on October the 1st, 2013?
Yes, consumers will be able to sign up for a health plan beginning on October 1st.
They will actually be able to pick a plan, whether it's Cigna, Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Platinum, Gold, Silver, Bronze, whatever. They will be able to do that on October the 1st.
That's my expectation based on the progress that we have made and what I am told will be in place on October 1st. Yes.
Thank you. And this will be my last question because I'm running out of time. Most of Obamacare is based on the premise that by forcing younger people into the market, they will help lower the cost for the older and the sicker individuals. But because the penalty is so weak, there's a real problem if all those young people don't show up, and I'm afraid they won't. In my home state of Georgia, the Insurance Commission announced that for the average 27-year-old, no longer on their parents' policy, out of the basement, living on their own, premiums are set to rise anywhere from 85 to 198%. It seems that a $95 penalty would do little to incent young people like that to purchase coverage when faced with huge premium increases. Mr. Cohen, a lot of the premise of Obamacare is based on getting these young people to enroll to help broaden the pool, lower the cost for the older and sicker. Have you heard any concerns that because the penalty for Obamacare is so weak Young people may stay out of the program in the first year, and if they do opt out, what will this do to the cost for the others?
So, yes, I have read things, speculating that the penalty is low and will not be a reason for people to sign up. But I think our research shows that most people want health care, and the barrier has been the cost, and that with subsidies, the coverage will be affordable, and it will be high-quality care, and we are looking forward to people, including young people, enrolling in coverage.
Thank you.
Thank you. And, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your indulgence, and I yield back.
Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Griffith is next, but he's going to yield his time. Yield it first to Mr. Shimkus to ask a question, and then to Mr. Griffith. Mr. Shimkus, you're recognized.
I thank you. I thank my colleague. I want to thank the chairman for letting me sit in. I'm not on this subcommittee, and I want to thank the ranking member. Mr. Cohen, welcome. You're trying to do the job presented to you, and this is a tough committee. So let me ask a couple questions, because I've been trying to get my, just like, regardless of how we feel on the law, if nothing changes and it gets enacted, members of Congress we're going to have to address our constituents' concerns and deal with that. So what I've tried to do is a couple things. I've tried to meet with my grantees. I have met with one, but some are now making themselves available to me. And I'm not doing it I'm just trying to do it to get information. So I don't know what we can do from the administration's perspective to encourage the grantees to talk to the elected members of Congress in the regions that they're going to represent. But I would personally appreciate it, because I'm trying to develop a relationship, because constituents are going to come to us. They do for Medicare. They come to us for Medicaid. They do for Social Security, Veterans Affairs. That's part of our job. And I just need help. So I just say that as a member appealing to the administration.
So I think we'd like to work with you on a process for getting you the information that you want, and are entitled to, that won't be disruptive of the work that needs to be happening, particularly at this particularly critical moment when they're just getting ready to start their work.
Yeah, and I get it. I mean, because I did meet with one, and it was very helpful. The other request I have is, we've asked if we can get, especially our staff member who deals, most of us have constituent service people in our congressional districts. I have one that she's an expert now on Medicare and Medicaid. I have another one who's an expert on Veterans Affairs. We put forth a request to say, can I get this person trained? Can they sit through the training?
Yes.
We were told no. So
you were told no by?
I can give you the answers, but we were told we can't. They wouldn't allow us to be trained. So
that doesn't sound right to me. Well,
no, that's fine. I want them. I want my staffer to know as much information as they can, as they're going to have to deal with this. Hopefully not, but
no, absolutely.
My guess is they might have to deal with this. So when I talked to the one grantee, this was the point that they made. They've got 33 navigators. They're all dispersed throughout healthcare. We vetted that out in this hearing today. But they only have 2 slots for training. There's a 20-hour, there's a online training. I've learned that much. And then I'm from Illinois. So there's a 2-day training, probably an overnight. And that's kind of why we were researching to get our staff are involved in both those trainings. But the real answer... Is that
the state-required training, or is that...
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to figure it out. But my point is, this one grantee will, before the operational date of October 1st, will only be able to get 2 of his individuals through the training. And I can tell you, I don't want to err, but I'd be glad to talk to you.
If our ledge folks could get in touch with your staff, I'd really be very happy to look into that in particular.
And then they also raised the issue that getting a clearance for these people is maybe the state of Illinois providing clearance. They will not be ready to handle this information because of the clearance process. So I'm just using this opportunity to show you some of the concerns that I have. And I'm very concerned because I don't like the law. I voted against the law. but I know I'm going to get calls about how we can help my constituents, and I want to be ready to do that.
So I appreciate that very much. I have to say that I am concerned that some states have put in requirements which they're entitled to do. I mean, but that are making it a little bit more difficult for the navigators to get ready in time for October 1st. So maybe we can work with you and try to work through some of those issues.
I would appreciate it. Let me just go the final question. It was kind of based upon listening to the testimony today about whether you're going to go door to door, and I don't really have a dog in that fight, but I am concerned that as we have people who are trained and qualified, that we have a process that someone can go back to a government website and say they're legit, they're not legit. Have you all considered putting a list of names of the navigators on a .gov site or something?
So we are working through that. I think the latest discussion is that we will provide the list to the state insurance departments, and so that there'll be a local place that people can go to make sure that folks are who they're supposed to be.
And it's up to them if they put it online or not?
Right.
Okay. Again, Chairman, thank you very much. Ranking Member, thank you very much, and I yield back the time.
I thank the gentleman from Illinois, and I think many officers would love to know how our staff can also log on and get the training as well. Thank you. Finally, Mr. Griffith is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that very much. Let me follow up on that. It might also be good to get some of these folks' IDs. In this morning's Bluefield Daily Telegraph, there's an article about door-to-door scammers looking for prescription drug information. Now, I know you can't stop all the bad actors out there, but we have a group running around in Tazewell County, Virginia, pretending to be part of the Appalachian Agency for Senior Citizens, and even though you're telling folks they're not supposed to do door-to-door, that's the word out there is that some people are going to do door-to-door. I would now draw your attention to the Exhibit 2, and you'll notice in that proposal, in the second paragraph, it says that they propose going door-to-door. So even some of the proposals and some of the people who are supposed to be doing this apparently have the misunderstanding they're supposed to go door-to-door. One of the other questions that I have for you, and then I'll come back to Exhibit 2, so you might want to leave that open, is that the State Corporation Commission in Virginia, Bureau of Insurance, approved or certified as acceptable plans at the end of July. It was their assumption that they would have some information by now. They, as of this morning, do not know whether or not their plans, because Virginia's not doing its own exchange, it's going to the federal exchange, but the State Bureau of Insurance was sending plans up that were approved. They haven't heard anything back as of this morning, so they don't know whether these plans are actually going to be approved or not. And so I would ask you to check on that, please, and get us some help, because we've got 7 business days left to go, and the state of Virginia doesn't know what plans are going to be approved by the
I absolutely, well,
exchange.
that surprises me because I know we've been in contact with the states on a regular basis, but I will absolutely follow through on
And
that.
I'll just tell you, we checked with them this morning. I will tell you another concern is, and this happens in a lot of rural areas, I'm sure, is that there's not going to be competition. In 10 of the jurisdictions I represent, there's either only one shop plan or only one individual plan. In 5 of those jurisdictions, the counties of Buchanan, Grayson, Lee, Scott, and the city of Bristol, there's only one shop plan and one individual plan. And so a lot of my constituents do not have a whole lot of choices to choose from, and obviously if there's a monopoly, that may affect prices as well, wouldn't you think? That being said, I'll point you back now to the Exhibit 2, just so you'll know that we're looking at this. You'll see on the first page the project abstract for the Navigator, and it's going to cover 2 counties, one in Florida, one in Texas. On the next page, you'll see further that the application says they'll have 50 exchange navigators. Then you have to follow through, and we've done some of the math for you, and my time's running out, so I'll lead you through some of this and then ask you to comment. On the next page, you'll see their enrollment goals, and they state in the second bullet point that they want enrollment goals, about 75% of those they're trying to reach, and they indicate that through provision of literature, et cetera, a total of 288,750 per targeted county by the end of the program year, or a total of 577,700. And so what we've got is we've got a navigator in their statement saying that somebody in your office approved that they're going to enroll 577,000 people plus by the end of the year, and that works out to 11,500 enrollees per navigator. When you take that 577,500 people and divide it by 50 navigators, and of course remember these are the folks who were also not only going to be doing fairs and so forth, but were going to be saying they were going to go door to door. Do you really believe that one navigator can enroll 11,500 people? Taking the time that they had originally when this was done till the end of the year, it looks like it's 31 people a day, counting weekends and holidays. I mean, that's not really very realistic, is it? I've done door knocking before, and I've done a lot of voter outreach, and to reach that many people a day and actually get them to say yes is not an easy accomplishment.
So I would say again, I mean, this is clearly a proposal and an application. It was approved. This grantee was approved. They got a grant. There is a budget process that happens as part of that approval. I can't tell you. I will commit to you to find out more information about this grantee if you'd like, but I can't tell you whether this is how it ended up or whether there were any changes, and I don't feel comfortable commenting on it because I literally I'm just seeing it now. So
I understand that if you could give me some comment later, I would appreciate that very much. These are concerning numbers, and obviously there are some people out there at least thinking they're supposed to go door to door, and that's of concern. Because then when people start going door to door, it makes it much easier for particularly senior citizens to be victims of bad actors, and not the real navigators. I'm not going to ascribe that to the real navigators, but folks going out there and they know people are supposed to be going door to door. People are coming by, and the next thing you know, they're finding out whether or not they have prescription drugs. And then what they're doing apparently in that particular county, or what the sheriff fears is that they will go back and rob the house, and they're more interested in getting the drugs than they are getting the TVs, and they're trying to figure out which are the prime targets, and so that's of concern. I will also tell you, and I'm not sure that this falls under your jurisdiction, but we're having a real problem with the doctor shortage in the Commonwealth of Virginia. There's an article today about some people in the eastern part of the state that are having a problem. I don't represent that particular part of Virginia, and I will tell you that recently one of my hospitals closed. Their number one reason was Obamacare. And the aspects, the cuts to Medicare, the double, I call it the scissor, where the states under the original plan were supposed to, but didn't have to under the Supreme Court ruling, expand Medicaid, and then the final straw for this particular folks, besides the war on coal, which lowered the economy in the area, so they had less insured people, the final straw was the fact that they couldn't get doctors to staff the hospital in an adequate fashion, and so now I've got folks that are going to have to travel an hour to an hour and a half to get cardiac care. It's a very serious concern. I'm very worried about the people who live in my district and whether or not they're going to be able to get adequate health care under this Obamacare program. And like the others who've spoken, I too hope that you'll educate us on how to enroll people, because we'll get calls.
The gentleman's time has expired, and with that, Mr. Cohen, we appreciate you coming for this committee again today, and I ask unanimous consent that the written opening statements of other members be introduced in the record, if they wish, and without objection, those will be entered in the record. I also ask unanimous consent to enter the document binder into the record, subject to appropriate redactions by staff. I also ask for unanimous consent to put an article into the record from the Business Journal dated September 12, 2013. So without objection, that is so ordered. Again, Mr. Cohen, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate your timely response also to members' requests for assistance for their staff and others in providing that information. And for the testimony that you and other members have asked here, and the devotion of members in this hearing today, the committee rules provide that members have 10 days to submit additional questions for the record of the witness. And with that, this hearing is now adjourned.